I never imagined that building a simple storage shed would turn into a war with the most insufferable woman in Willow Creek Estates, but here I was, standing in my driveway at 7 in the morning with county officials while Sharon Whitmore pointed at my property like she was identifying a crime scene. My name is Grayson, and I had lived in this quiet subdivision in Roseville, California for 3 years without incident. The neighborhood was one of those planned communities built in the early 2000s, with neat rows of 2-story houses, manicured lawns, and an HOA that supposedly existed to maintain property values. For the most part, I kept to myself, mowed my lawn every Saturday, and painted my house the approved shade of beige that everyone else had. I worked as a software engineer from home, which meant I spent most of my time in my office upstairs, occasionally venturing out to grab coffee or run errands. Everything changed last spring when I decided I needed more storage space. My garage had become cluttered with camping gear, old furniture, holiday decorations, and all the miscellaneous junk that accumulates over the years. I researched the HOA guidelines thoroughly, measured my yard multiple times, and submitted the proper architectural review application for a 12 by 16-foot shed to be placed in my backyard. The guidelines were clear. Any structure had to be at least 10 feet from the property line, couldn't exceed 12 feet in height, and had to match the aesthetic of the main house. I planned everything down to the last detail, choosing materials and colors that would blend seamlessly with my home. The approval came back within 3 weeks. I was actually surprised at how smoothly the process went. The Architectural Review Committee signed off on my plans without any modifications. I hired a local contractor named Miguel who had built sheds for half the neighborhood, and we broke ground on a Monday morning in April. The weather was perfect, and Miguel assured me we would have the shed completed within a week. That was when Sharon Whitmore entered my life like a tornado of passive aggression and manufactured outrage. Sharon was the vice president of the Willow Creek Estates HOA, a position she treated like she was running a small nation rather than overseeing a suburban neighborhood of 200 homes. She was in her late 40s with perfectly highlighted blonde hair that she wore in a bob that never seemed to move, even on windy days. She drove a white Lexus SUV with a custom license plate that read HOA-rep, which I assumed stood for HOA representative, and she walked her 3 small dogs every morning at exactly 6:30, always dressed like she was about to attend a country club luncheon. I had maybe spoken to Sharon twice in the 3 years I lived there. Once when I first moved in and she stopped by with a binder full of HOA rules that was approximately 4 inches thick, and another time when she knocked on my door to inform me that my trash cans were visible from the street on a non-collection day, which apparently violated Section 7.3 of the community guidelines. I had smiled, apologized, and moved the cans. I learned quickly that it was easier to just comply than to argue with someone who clearly had too much time on her hands. On the second day of shed construction, Sharon appeared in my backyard without warning. Miguel and his assistant were laying the foundation when I heard her voice calling out from the side gate. "Excuse me. Hello, I need to speak with the property owner immediately." I walked out of my house to find Sharon standing with her hands on her hips, staring at the construction site like she had just discovered a toxic waste dump. "Hi Sharon," I said, trying to keep my voice friendly. "What can I help you with?" "I received a report the construction was happening on your property," she said, pulling out her phone and taking several photos. "I need to verify that you received proper approval from the Architectural Review Committee." "I did," I replied. "I submitted my application in March and got approval 3 weeks later. I have all the paperwork inside if you want to see it." Sharon's lips pressed into a thin line. "I will need to review that documentation. There have been concerns raised about the placement of this structure." "Concerns from who?" I asked, genuinely curious since I had barely spoken to any of my neighbors. "That information is confidential," Sharon said primly. "But as vice president of the HOA, it is my responsibility to ensure that all construction complies with our community standards and local building codes." I went inside and retrieved my folder of documents, including the approved application with the Architectural Committee's signatures, my plot plan showing the shed placement, and the contractor's license and insurance information. I handed the folder to Sharon, who flipped through it with increasing irritation. "The approval seems to be in order," she admitted reluctantly. "However, I have serious concerns about the setback measurements. This structure appears to be dangerously close to the property line." I pointed to the plot plan. "It's 15 feet from the rear property line and 12 feet from the sideline. The requirement is 10 feet minimum. I measured it myself multiple times." Sharon's eyes narrowed. "I will be conducting my own measurements. If I find that this shed violates setback requirements, you will be required to remove it at your own expense and you will face fines for non-compliance." She handed back my folder and marched away before I could respond, her heels clicking on my driveway as she left. Miguel walked over and shook his head. Every neighborhood has one of those. Don't worry, man, we measured everything. You are good. I wanted to believe him, but something about the way Sharon had looked at my property made me uneasy. She had that expression of someone who had already decided you were guilty and was just looking for evidence to support her conclusion. The shed construction continued without incident for the next few days. Miguel and his assistant worked efficiently, and by Friday afternoon the structure was mostly complete. It looked fantastic, exactly what I had envisioned. The siding matched my house perfectly, the roof shingles were the same color, and it sat in the back corner of my yard in a spot that was barely visible from the street. I was already planning how I would organize everything inside, picturing neat shelves and labeled bins for all my belongings. That Friday evening, I found a certified letter in my mailbox. It was from the Willow Creek Estates HOA, signed by Sharon Whitmore. Dear Mr. Grayson, the letter began in formal, cold language. It has come to the attention of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association that the shed structure currently under construction on your property located at 847 Meadowbrook Lane is in violation of county setback requirements. Specifically, the structure appears to be located less than 10 feet from the rear property line, which violates both HOA guidelines and Placer County building codes. You are hereby ordered to cease all construction immediately. A formal hearing has been scheduled for May 15th at 7 p.m. in the community clubhouse to address this violation. Failure to attend this hearing or to comply with HOA directives may result in daily fines of up to $250 per day, a lien on your property, and potential legal action. Please confirm receipt of this letter within 48 hours. I read the letter 3 times, my blood pressure rising with each pass. The shed was not in violation of anything. I had measured it myself, Miguel had measured it, and the architectural committee had approved the exact placement shown on my plot plan. This was absurd. I immediately called the phone number listed for HOA inquiries, which went straight to voicemail. I left a message explaining that there was clearly some mistake and requesting a callback. No one called me back that evening or over the weekend. On Monday morning, I called the Placer County Planning Department to get clarification on setback requirements. A helpful woman named Barbara confirmed that residential structures in my zoning area required a 10-foot setback from property lines, and that if I had questions about my specific property, I could request a county inspector to verify measurements. Does it cost anything to have someone come out? I asked. No, it is a free service, Barbara said. We want to make sure everyone is in compliance. I can schedule someone for later this week if you would like. Yes, please, I said. The sooner the better. She scheduled an inspector named Robert Chen to come out on Thursday morning at 10 a.m. I felt slightly better knowing that an official county representative would be able to confirm what I already knew. My shed was perfectly legal and properly placed. In the meantime, I decided to do some research on Sharon Whitmore and the HOA board. I dug out the binder she had given me 3 years ago and started reading through the bylaws and regulations. What I discovered was troubling. The HOA had broad powers to levy fines, place liens on properties, and even foreclose on homes in extreme cases of non-compliance. The fines started at $50 per day for minor violations, but could escalate to $250 per day for major structural violations. The bylaws also stated that the HOA board had sole discretion in determining what constituted a violation. I also found the HOA's website, which had meeting minutes posted for the past several years. Sharon Whitmore's name appeared constantly, usually in the context of reporting violations and pushing for stricter enforcement. Over the past 2 years alone, she had initiated violation proceedings against 17 different homeowners for issues ranging from unauthorized paint colors to lawn ornaments to parking commercial vehicles in driveways. In almost every case, the homeowner had been forced to make changes and pay fines. I found a neighborhood Facebook group and cautiously posted a question asking if anyone had experience dealing with HOA violations. Within an hour, I had 20 responses. Multiple people warned me about Sharon specifically. She tried to fine us because our mailbox was the wrong shade of black, one person wrote. We had to hire a lawyer just to get her to back off. Sharon forced us to remove a playhouse we built for our kids, another person posted. She claimed it was not architecturally compatible with the neighborhood. It was just a basic wooden playhouse from a kit. Whatever you do, do not try to reason with her. Someone else advised she does not care about being right. She only cares about exerting control. Document everything and be prepared to fight. The more I read, the more I realized I was not dealing with a simple misunderstanding. Sharon had a pattern of targeting homeowners, and once she decided you were in violation, she would not let go until she got what she wanted. I spent the next few days gathering my documentation. I made copies of everything: my original application, the approval letter, my plot plan, Photos of the construction process with timestamps, Miguel's contractor information, and receipts for all materials. I also went outside with a tape measure and remeasured every single dimension of the shed's placement, taking photos of the tape measure against the property line markers. The shed was exactly 15 feet and 4 inches from the rear property line and 12 feet and 7 inches from the side property line. There was absolutely no violation. Thursday morning arrived, and Robert Chen from the Placer County Planning Department showed up promptly at 10 a.m. in a county truck. He was a man in his 30s with a clipboard and a professional measuring wheel. Sharon Whitmore arrived approximately 2 minutes later, as if she had been watching my house waiting for the inspector. "Good morning," Robert said, shaking my hand. "I understand you want to verify setback measurements for your new shed." "Yes," I said. "I have been told by the HOA that it is in violation, but I measured everything according to code before I started construction." Sharon inserted herself into the conversation immediately. "As vice president of the Willow Creek Estates HOA, I requested this inspection. This structure is clearly in violation of setback requirements and needs to be removed or relocated." Robert remained professional. "Let me take a look and get some measurements. Do you have the property survey markers identified?" I led him to the back corner of my yard where the metal survey pins were embedded in the ground. Robert pulled out his measuring wheel and a laser measuring device. Sharon followed close behind, her phone out to record everything. "Let me start with the rear property line," Robert said. He placed his laser measure against the survey pin and aimed it at the shed. The device beeped and displayed a number, 15 feet 4 inches to the structure. Sharon made a dismissive sound. "That cannot be right. Measure it again." Robert did not react to her tone. He measured again with both the laser and his tape measure. 15 feet 4 inches. "The requirement is 10 feet minimum, so you have more than 5 feet of clearance." "What about the side?" Sharon demanded. Robert moved to the side property line and repeated the process. 12 feet 7 inches from the side property line, again well above the 10-foot requirement. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had been right all along. The shed was completely legal. Sharon's face had turned red. "Those measurements cannot be accurate. I measured it myself, and it was less than 8 feet from the property line." Robert turned to her calmly. "Madam, I am using calibrated professional equipment. These measurements are accurate. The structure is in full compliance with county setback requirements." "I demand you measure again," Sharon insisted. "I have measured multiple times with multiple instruments," Robert said, his patience clearly wearing thin. "The results are consistent. The shed is properly placed." Sharon pointed at the shed dramatically. "You are telling me that structure is more than 15 feet from the back fence?" "I am telling you it is 15 feet and 4 inches from the property line," Robert corrected. "The fence appears to be set slightly inside the actual property line, which may be causing your confusion. I had not considered that, but it made sense. The wooden fence that marked the back of my yard was probably a few inches inside the actual property boundary, which would make the shed appear closer than it actually was if someone was just eyeballing it." Sharon was not accepting this explanation. "I want this in writing. I want an official report stating these measurements. I will file my inspection report with the county and you can request a copy," Robert said. "The property owner will receive a letter confirming compliance within 5 business days." He turned to me and lowered his voice. "You are all good here. Your shed meets all county requirements. If you have any issues with your HOA, you may want to consult with an attorney about your rights." "Thank you," I said gratefully. Robert packed up his equipment and left. Sharon remained in my backyard staring at the shed like it had personally offended her. "This is not over," she said quietly. "Sharon, the county inspector just confirmed I am in compliance," I said, trying to keep my voice reasonable. "There is no violation. The hearing should be canceled. The HOA has its own standards that may exceed county requirements," Sharon replied. "You will still need to appear at the hearing." "What additional standards?" I asked. "I followed the guidelines exactly as written in the HOA documents." "That will be determined by the board," Sharon said cryptically, and then she walked away without another word. I stood in my backyard feeling angry and frustrated. This woman was clearly on some kind of power trip, and she was not going to let this go no matter what the facts were. I went inside and immediately started researching HOA lawyers in the Sacramento area. The next day, I received Robert Chen's official inspection report in my email. It was brief and professional, confirming that the shed at 847 Meadowbrook Lane met all Placer County setback requirements with measurements of 15 feet 4 inches from the rear property line and 12 feet 7 inches from the side property line. The report concluded that no violations were present and no corrective action was required. I printed multiple copies of this report and sent one via certified mail to the HOA board, with a letter requesting that the upcoming hearing be canceled since the county had confirmed compliance. The HOA responded 3 days later with another letter from Sharon, stating that the hearing would proceed as scheduled because concerns have been raised about whether the proper approval process was followed and whether the structure complies with community aesthetic standards. So now we were moving the goalposts. It was not about setbacks anymore since she had lost that argument. Now it was about vague aesthetic standards and proper process, even though I had documentation showing I had followed every step correctly. I made an appointment with an attorney named Donna Prescott who specialized in HOA disputes. Her office was in downtown Sacramento, in a modern building with glass walls and contemporary furniture. Donna was in her 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun and glasses that gave her a scholarly appearance. She listened carefully as I explained the situation, occasionally taking notes on her laptop. "Do you have all your documentation with you?" she asked when I finished. I handed over my folder, which had grown considerably thicker over the past few weeks. Donna reviewed everything methodically, paying particular attention to the approval letter and the county inspection report. "This is pretty straightforward," she said finally. "You followed the proper procedures, received approval, and the structure is in compliance with both county codes and HOA guidelines as written. This board member, Sharon, seems to be manufacturing a controversy where none exists. Can she do that?" I asked. "Can the HOA just decide I am in violation even when I am not?" "They can try," Donna said, "but HOAs are required to follow their own bylaws and enforce rules consistently. If your shed meets the written requirements, they cannot arbitrarily decide it is in violation just because one board member has a problem with it. That being said, HOA boards do have broad authority, and fighting them can be expensive and time-consuming. What do you recommend?" Donna leaned back in her chair. "Go to the hearing, present your documentation calmly and professionally. Make them state clearly what specific rule or regulation you are allegedly violating. If they cannot point to a specific written rule, object on the record. If they still find you in violation, you will likely need to file a lawsuit to challenge their decision. At that point, you would be looking at several $1,000s in legal fees, though you might be able to recover those costs if you prevail." "That is insane," I said. "I built a shed, a legal approved shed, and now I might have to sue my own HOA?" "Unfortunately, this is not uncommon," Donna said sympathetically. HOAs can become problematic when board members let personal agendas override common sense. The good news is that you have excellent documentation, and the county report is particularly valuable. A judge would have a hard time siding with the HOA when a county inspector has already verified compliance. I paid Donna's consultation fee and left her office feeling slightly better but also frustrated at the absurdity of the situation. I had done everything right, and yet I was still being harassed by someone who could not admit she was wrong. The hearing was scheduled for May 15th at 7 p.m. in the community clubhouse. I marked my calendar and spent the intervening days preparing my presentation. I created a simple packet with tabs for each section: the original application, the approval letter, the plot plan with measurements, photos of the construction, and the county inspection report. I made 10 copies, enough for everyone on the 5-person board plus extras. The night of the hearing arrived. I dressed in business casual clothes and gathered my materials. My neighbor from 2 houses down, a guy named Paul, who I occasionally talked to about sports, stopped me as I was walking to my car. "Hey, I heard you were having trouble with the HOA," he said. "Sharon came by asking if your shed bothered me." I told her I could not even see it from my property and I did not care. "She is claiming it violates setback rules even though the county measured it and confirmed it is fine," I explained. Paul shook his head. "She did the same thing to the people on Oakmont Street last year. Claimed their patio cover was not approved. They ended up having to hire a lawyer. She eventually backed off, but it cost them like $5,000 in legal fees." "That is ridiculous," I said. "Yeah, well, Sharon has nothing better to do than police the neighborhood. Good luck tonight. Hopefully the rest of the board is more reasonable." I drove to the community clubhouse, which was located near the neighborhood entrance. It was a single-story building with a meeting room, a small kitchen, and a fitness center that rarely had anyone in it. When I arrived, several other residents were already there, sitting in folding chairs facing a long table where the board members would sit. Sharon was standing near the front, talking to an older woman I recognized as Patricia Montgomery, the HOA president. Patricia was in her 60s, with gray hair and a permanent expression that suggested she was tired of dealing with everyone's problems. The other 3 board members filtered in over the next few minutes. A man named Donald, who worked in real estate, a younger woman named Melissa, who was relatively new to the board, and another older man named Frank, who had lived in the neighborhood since it was built. At exactly 7 p.m., Patricia called the meeting to order. There were about 15 residents in attendance, which was apparently a large turnout by HOA meeting standards. The first 30 minutes were devoted to standard business. reviewing minutes from the last meeting, discussing landscaping contracts for the common areas, and debating whether to repave the walking paths. Finally, Patricia looked at her agenda and said, "Next item is a hearing regarding a potential violation at 8 and 47 Meadowbrook Lane. Mr. Grayson, are you present?" I stood up. "Yes, I am here. Please come forward and state your case." I walked to the front of the room and handed out my prepared packets to each board member. Sharon already had her own copy of my documents, which she had marked up with sticky notes and highlights. "Thank you all for your time," I began. "As you can see from the documentation I provided, I submitted an application for a storage shed in March, which was approved by the Architectural Review Committee on April 2nd. The shed was built according to the approved plans, and it complies with all HOA guidelines and county setback requirements. Last week, a Placer County inspector measured the structure and confirmed it is 15 feet 4 inches from the rear property line and 12 feet 7 inches from the side property line. The required setback is 10 feet, so I have more than adequate clearance. I believe there has been a misunderstanding, but I am confident that when you review the facts, you will see that there is no violation." Patricia flipped through the packet while I spoke. The other board members did the same, except for Sharon, who was staring at me with barely concealed hostility. "Sharon, you initiated this complaint," Patricia said. "What is your position?" Sharon stood up dramatically. "Mr. Grayson may have received approval from the Architectural Committee, but that approval was based on inaccurate information. I have personally measured his shed, and it is far too close to the property line. While this county inspector may claim otherwise, I believe his measurements are incorrect. Furthermore, the shed is visible from certain angles in the neighborhood and does not maintain the aesthetic integrity we have worked so hard to preserve in Willow Creek Estates. The county measurements are not a matter of opinion," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "They are performed with professional calibrated equipment by a licensed inspector. My shed is exactly where my approved plan showed it would be." "I dispute those measurements," Sharon said flatly. Frank, the older board member, spoke up. "Sharon, if the county says it is in compliance, I am not sure what authority we have to override that. We cannot enforce rules that are stricter than county code without going through a formal process to amend our bylaws. Our bylaws give us discretion in matters of aesthetic standards," Sharon countered. "This shed is an eyesore. It matches my house exactly," I said. "Same siding, same roof color, same trim. It is barely visible from the street." Melissa, the younger board member, raised her hand tentatively. "I drove by the property before this meeting, and honestly, I could barely see the shed from the road. It is tucked in the back corner of the yard. I am not sure what the issue is." Sharon turned to her sharply. "The issue is maintaining consistent standards. If we allow Mr. Grayson to violate setback requirements, every homeowner in this community will think they can do the same." "But he did not violate anything," Melissa said, holding up the county report. "This report is pretty clear." Patricia rubbed her temples like she was getting a headache. "Let me be clear about our options here. We can either accept the county's determination that the shed is in compliance, or we can vote to pursue enforcement action based on aesthetic concerns. However, if we choose enforcement and Mr. Grayson challenges us in court, we could be exposing the HOA to significant legal liability, especially given this county report." Donald, the real estate board member, nodded. "I have to agree with Patricia. This looks like a losing battle. The county has already measured and approved it. We approved the plans ourselves. I do not see any grounds for enforcement." Sharon's face was getting redder. "So we are just going to ignore violations now? What is the point of having an HOA if we do not enforce our own rules?" "We are not ignoring violations," Patricia said firmly. "We are following the facts. The county says there is no violation. Our own approval process was followed correctly. I am not seeing a legitimate basis for enforcement action." "I call for a vote," Sharon said. Patricia sighed. "Fine, all in favor of finding Mr. Grayson in violation and requiring corrective action?" Sharon raised her hand. No one else did. "Opposed?" Patricia, Frank, Donald, and Melissa all raised their hands. "The motion fails," Patricia announced. "Mr. Grayson, your shed is approved and there will be no enforcement action. This matter is closed." I felt relief flood through me. "Thank you." Sharon gathered her papers and stood abruptly. "I am appalled by this board's unwillingness to enforce community standards. This is a disgrace." She stormed out of the clubhouse, leaving everyone sitting in awkward silence. Patricia looked exhausted. "Is there any other business?" The meeting continued for a few more minutes, but I barely paid attention. I had won. The board had sided with facts over Sharon's unfounded accusations. I thanked the board members individually as they packed up to leave. "Sorry you had to go through this," Patricia said quietly. "Sharon means well, but she can be overzealous sometimes. Your shed is fine. Enjoy it." I drove home feeling vindicated but also angry that I had been put through weeks of stress over nothing. Sharon had wasted everyone's time and the HOA's resources because she could not admit she was wrong about her measurements. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, I received another certified letter from the HOA. This time it was not from Sharon, but from Patricia, the president. The letter informed me that Sharon Whitmore had filed a formal complaint against me with the Architectural Committee, claiming that I had built the shed without proper permits and that she had evidence of construction code violations. I immediately called the Placer County Building Department. After navigating their phone system, I reached a supervisor named Margaret who explained that storage sheds under 120 square feet did not require building permits in my zoning area. My shed was 192 square feet, which meant I should have obtained a permit. My stomach dropped. I checked the HOA guidelines and they did not mention anything about county permits. The contractor did not say anything either. Unfortunately, it is the property owner's responsibility to verify permit requirements, Margaret said sympathetically. But the good news is that you can apply for a retroactive permit. We will need to send an inspector out to verify the construction meets code, and if everything checks out, we will issue the permit. There is a late filing fee, but it is not terrible. How much? Usually around $300, plus the permit fee of about $150. I called Miguel, my contractor, who was apologetic but defensive. Man, I have built so many of these sheds, I thought I knew the rules. I am really sorry. But the shed is built to code, so you should not have any problem getting the permit. I was frustrated but tried to focus on solutions. I applied for the retroactive permit online that same day and paid the fees. The county scheduled an inspection for the following week. In the meantime, Sharon apparently had not stopped investigating. I received an email from her personally with photographs attached. The photos showed my shed from various angles, along with measurements she had taken using what appeared to be a basic tape measure. Her email claimed that the shed was clearly less than 10 feet from the property line, and that the county inspector had been negligent or incompetent in his measurements. I responded with a copy of Robert Chen's official report and pointed out that her tape measure measurements were meaningless compared to professionally calibrated equipment. I also informed her that I had applied for the necessary building permit and that the issue would be resolved shortly. Sharon's response was immediate and hostile. Your continued disregard for community standards is unacceptable. I will be filing a formal complaint with the board requesting your removal from the community. I had to read that sentence 3 times. Removal from the community? Was she actually suggesting the HOA could force me to sell my house over a shed that was proven to be in compliance with setback requirements? I forwarded the email to Donna Prescott, my attorney. She called me within an hour. This is crossing into harassment territory, Donna said. The HOA cannot force you to sell your home because one board member has a personal vendetta against you. I am going to draft a cease and desist letter to send to both Sharon personally and the HOA board. If she continues this behavior, we may need to consider filing a lawsuit for harassment. I just want to live in peace, I said, feeling defeated. I do not understand why she is so fixated on this. People like Sharon often have psychological issues around control, Donna explained. When someone challenges their authority or proves them wrong, they escalate rather than backing down. The best thing you can do is document everything and maintain clear boundaries. The county building inspector came out the following Tuesday. His name was James, and he was much older than Robert Chen, probably in his late 50s. He spent about an hour examining the shed, checking the foundation, the framing, the roof, and the electrical work I had added for lighting. Everything looks good, James said finally. The construction is solid. You will have your permit issued within a few days. That is a relief, I said. This whole situation has been a nightmare. James had seen my file, which included notes about the HOA complaint. Yeah, I saw the backstory here. Between you and me, some HOAs create more problems than they solve. Your shed is built better than most I see. You have got nothing to worry about from a code perspective. True to his word, I received my building permit via email 3 days later. It was officially dated and recorded with the county. I immediately sent copies to the HOA board and to Sharon directly, with a brief note stating that all permitting issues had been resolved and requesting that all complaints against my property be formally closed. For a few weeks, things were quiet. I started using my shed, organizing my garage overflow, and enjoying the extra storage space. I thought maybe Sharon had finally given up. Then the fines started. I received a violation notice in mid-June stating that my shed door was not kept closed when not in use, which violated Section 12.7 of the community guidelines regarding unsightly storage. The fine was $50. I checked Section 12.7. It stated that outdoor storage of items visible from the street or neighboring properties should be screened or enclosed to maintain aesthetic standards. My shed door had been open one afternoon while I was moving items in and out. Apparently Sharon had driven by at that exact moment and taken photos. I paid the $50 fine to avoid escalation but sent a letter to the HOA board documenting the pattern of harassment and requesting that Sharon be recused from any matters involving my property. The response from Patricia was sympathetic but non-committal. The board takes all concerns seriously. We will discuss your request at our next meeting. A week later, I received another violation notice. This time, Sharon claimed that grass clippings from my lawn mowing had blown onto the sidewalk and not been cleaned up immediately, violating Section 9.2 regarding maintenance of common areas. Another $50 fine. I started documenting everything. Every time I mowed my lawn, I took time-stamped photos showing that I cleaned the sidewalk. Every time I entered or exited my shed, I made sure the door was closed afterward. I felt like I was living under constant surveillance. In July, I received my third violation notice in as many weeks. This one claimed that my outdoor trash cans were visible from the street on a non-collection day. The fine was now $100 because it was a repeated violation of storage visibility standards. That was when I snapped. I had been patient, I had followed every rule, and I had proven that my shed was completely legal. Now Sharon was inventing violations to punish me for embarrassing her at the board meeting. I called Donna Prescott again. I want to sue. This is harassment and it needs to stop. Donna agreed. I think we have enough documentation to file a lawsuit for harassment and abuse of authority. We will name both Sharon individually and the HOA. This will probably cost you between $5,000 and $10,000 in legal fees, but given the circumstances, I think you have a strong case. We can also seek compensation for your fees and emotional distress. Do it, I said. Donna drafted the lawsuit over the next week. The complaint alleged that Sharon Whitmore had engaged in a pattern of harassment, filed false violation reports, and abused her position on the HOA board to target me personally after I proved her initial accusations were false. We included all the documentation, the county reports, the emails, the escalating violation notices, and statements from neighbors who had witnessed Sharon's behavior. We filed the lawsuit in Placer County Superior Court in early August. Sharon and the HOA were served with the complaint on August 10th. The response was immediate and explosive. Sharon sent a mass email to the entire neighborhood accusing me of being a troublemaker who was attacking the HOA board with frivolous lawsuits. She included selective photos of my property from unflattering angles and claimed I was trying to destroy property values. Several neighbors contacted me privately to express support. Paul, my neighbor, told me that at least a dozen homeowners had dealt with Sharon's harassment over the years, and many were glad someone was finally standing up to her. The HOA's attorney contacted Donna a week after the lawsuit was filed, requesting a meeting to discuss settlement. We met at Donna's office in late August. The HOA was represented by a lawyer named Gregory from a firm that specialized in homeowner association law. My clients are willing to dismiss all pending violations against Mr. Grayson and refund the fines he has paid, Gregory began. In exchange, Mr. Grayson would withdraw his lawsuit and sign a mutual non-disparagement agreement. That is not sufficient, Donna replied. Mr. Grayson has been subjected to months of harassment by Ms. Whitmore. We are seeking compensation for his legal fees, emotional distress, and a formal agreement that Ms. Whitmore will have no involvement in any matters concerning his property going forward. Gregory glanced at his notes. The HOA board is willing to consider recusing Ms. Whitmore from decisions involving Mr. Grayson's property, but they cannot control her actions as a community resident. Then she needs to be removed from the board, I said. She has abused her position and wasted HOA resources pursuing a personal vendetta. The other board members know it. I know you know it. Gregory was quiet for a moment. I will discuss this with the board. No promises, but I think there may be room for an agreement. Over the next few weeks, there were several more negotiation sessions. The HOA board was divided. Patricia, Frank, and Melissa wanted Sharon gone and were willing to remove her from the board to settle the lawsuit. Donald was reluctant but eventually agreed. Sharon herself was furious and threatened to sue the HOA for wrongful termination. Eventually, we reached a settlement. The HOA agreed to remove Sharon Whitmore from the board immediately, dismiss all violation notices against my property, and refund all fines I had paid, totaling $300, pay $10,000 toward my legal fees. Implement new policies requiring at least 2 board members to approve any violation notice before it was sent to a homeowner. Issue a formal letter to all residents clarifying setback requirements and the proper process for complaints. In exchange, I agreed to withdraw the lawsuit and sign a confidentiality agreement about the settlement terms. Sharon was removed from the board at an emergency meeting in September. She showed up and gave an angry speech about how the board was betraying the community and enabling rule breakers. Several residents actually applauded when Patricia formally voted to remove her from her position. After the meeting, Sharon approached me in the parking lot. "You have ruined everything I worked for," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "I hope you are proud of yourself." "I built a legal shed," I replied calmly. "You decided to turn it into a war because you could not admit you made a mistake. This is on you." She stared at me for a long moment, then got in her white Lexus and drove away. Over the following months, things slowly returned to normal. The new HOA policies actually worked well. Violation notices became rare and were always thoroughly documented before being issued. Patricia told me privately that complaints to the board had decreased significantly since Sharon's departure. I learned later from Paul that Sharon had put her house on the market in October. She moved out in December, and I never saw her again. The new family that bought her house was friendly and quiet, and their teenage son occasionally asked if he could borrow my lawnmower. My shed remains in the back corner of my yard, exactly 15 feet 4 inches from the rear property line, completely legal and properly permitted. Every time I open the door to grab camping gear or holiday decorations, I think about the absurdity of the whole situation. The experience taught me several important lessons about dealing with HOAs and difficult people. First, documentation is everything. Without those precise measurements from the county inspector, the situation could have gone very differently. Second, some people will double down on being wrong rather than admit a mistake, and there is no reasoning with them. And third, standing up to bullies, even when it is expensive and stressful, is sometimes necessary to protect your rights and your peace of mind. I also learned that most people are reasonable. The other board members could have sided with Sharon out of loyalty, or because challenging her was difficult. Instead, they looked at the facts and made the right decision. The neighbors who reached out with support reminded me that communities are made up of individuals, not just the loudest or most aggressive voices. Looking back, I sometimes wish I had fought harder from the beginning instead of trying to appease Sharon with explanations and documentation. But I also recognize that following the proper processes and giving the system a chance to work was important. When it became clear that Sharon was not going to be reasonable, I had the documentation I needed to prove my case. The settlement money covered most of my legal fees, though I still spent about $3,000 out of pocket when everything was said and done. It was worth it for the peace of mind and to prevent Sharon from continuing to abuse her position to harass other homeowners. In the years since the dispute, I have become more involved in the HOA myself, attending meetings and volunteering for committees. I wanted to make sure that the organization functioned the way it was supposed to, maintaining common areas and enforcing reasonable rules consistently, not serving as a vehicle for personal power trips. Willow Creek Estates is actually a nice neighborhood now that the toxic element has been removed. Property values have remained stable, people generally get along, and the HOA board makes decisions based on written guidelines rather than arbitrary personal preferences. My shed still stands as a monument to the ridiculous battle I fought over something that should have been simple. It is sturdy, well-built, and completely legal. More importantly, it represents a principle. Homeowners have rights, and those rights cannot be trampled by bullies with clipboards and too much time on their hands. Sometimes when I am working in my yard on a Saturday afternoon, I look at that shed and feel a sense of satisfaction. Not just because it is a useful structure that solved my storage problems, but because defending my right to have it helped establish better governance in my community. Sharon Whitmore was wrong about the setback measurements by 8 feet. But the real distance was not physical. It was the gap between her perception of authority and the reality of the law. She thought being on the HOA board gave her unlimited power to enforce her personal preferences. She learned, expensively and publicly, that facts matter more than feelings, and that written rules exist to protect everyone, including homeowners from overzealous board members. The county measurements were clear and indisputable. My shed was 15 feet 4 inches from the property line, not less than 8 feet as Sharon had initially claimed. She was wrong by more than 7 feet in her accusations, a significant error that she refused to acknowledge even when confronted with professional documentation. In the end, the whole experience made me a better homeowner and a more engaged community member. I learned to stand up for myself, to document everything, and to not be intimidated by people who use positions of minor authority to bully others. These lessons have served me well, not just in dealing with HOA matters but in other aspects of life where principle and persistence matter more than avoiding conflict. My recommendation to anyone facing a similar situation is simple. Know your rights, follow the proper procedures, document everything meticulously, and do not be afraid to fight back when you are right. HOAs serve an important function, but they are not above the law, and board members are not dictators. When someone abuses their position, the system has remedies, and using those remedies is not only your right but your responsibility to protect yourself and others who might be targeted in the future. The shed stands as a testament to the idea that sometimes the smallest battles over the most mundane issues reveal important truths about power, authority, and the importance of holding people accountable when they abuse both. What started as a simple construction project became a case study in how not to run an HOA and how to resist when someone tries to use bureaucracy as a weapon. And on a practical level, I have a great shed with plenty of storage space, properly permitted and legally placed, that will serve me well for many years to come. Every box I store there, every tool I hang on the wall reminds me that I did the right thing by standing up for myself. That is worth more than any amount of money or hassle the battle cost me. The neighborhood is better off without Sharon's reign of terror, and I sleep better at night knowing that the fight I fought made things easier for everyone else who lives here. That is the real victory, more meaningful than any settlement check or board vote. Sometimes standing up to a bully is not just about you but about everyone else they might hurt if someone does not finally say enough is enough.